we don't understand what death is. This is why we're going to teach the next few classes, to help us overcome that, to not be afraid of death, but instead to look forward to it. Not to rush towards it, but to use each day to prepare for the inevitable. We will die, and none of us know when. In normal circumstances, if we knew that a big event was coming, we would prepare. If we were going to make a trip or a journey, we would do everything we need to prepare in advance so that when the moment comes that we have to depart, we're ready. And yet, who among us has prepared for death, which is a great journey that everyone here will take? And we're not prepared. Real gnosis is about preparing daily, being ready, so that when death arrives, we're not caught surprised, but instead we're caught aware, attentive, not avoiding it, not ignoring it, but ready for it. In this way, we can see that a prepared Gnostic, someone with real spiritual experience, sees death as an opportunity. As an opportunity to move on to something better. We're very attached to life, but we don't comprehend life. We're very afraid of death, but we don't comprehend death. If we comprehended life, we would understand that life, as it is now, is a stream of suffering. And if we comprehended death, we would understand that death is an opportunity to transform suffering. Oftentimes we see someone who's very ill and suffering intensely. And we expend a great amount of energy and effort to extend the person's life. When there are cases in which the person would be better off to die and take a new body, rather than extend their suffering for days or weeks or months or years. This is because we don't comprehend life and death. We don't understand what happens when we die. And this causes a great amount of suffering in the world, not only for the person who's ill, but for the families, for the ones that are close with that person. In the Gnostic tradition, like every other, by Gnostic tradition I mean all those traditions in the world who acquire true gnosis and teach true gnosis. This includes the tradition of Samael Aun Weor, but also the traditions of Tantra in Asia, and the Aztec and Mayan traditions, in the tradition of Islam, particularly related with the Sufis. Death is a topic of great importance and is celebrated, not avoided. In these images that I have to show you, we see that death is not avoided, but in fact it is celebrated and utilized. This image of a seated Buddha shows Padmasambhava, who's also called Guru Rinpoche. And he holds, you'll always know it's him, partly by his mustache, his beard, but also by his hat and his red robes and by his staff. The staff that he holds in his arm has many symbolic elements on it, which we don't have time to study in detail today. But you'll see at the peak, just below the Trinity, at the top, the trident, which represents the three forces, you see a skull. It's not accidental, and it's not just to scare you or be decorative. This is showing the role of death in his enlightenment, in his realization. In his hand, in his lap, he's holding a human skull, the top of the skull. And inside of that skull is a nectar, ambrosia, amrita, the food of the gods. That has a very rich symbolism, but pointedly related to death. The death of the mind, the death of the eye. It is in that we find the elixir of long life, immortality, the ambrosia of the gods, is in comprehension of that. This next image shows a meditator in a hut or a small building that's constructed for meditation. And with his eyes open, he is observing a body being consumed by wolf and birds. Most of us see this type of image and we feel repugnance, which is avoidance. Note that in yourself. That impulse to not look at it, to not see it. That impulse to not look at the reality of death is a sign of our aversion to death. It is a sign of our ignorance. The Gnostic needs to look squarely in the face of all experiences and neither avoid or indulge, but instead comprehend. This image represents the foundational teaching of all forms of Buddhism, which is naturally a foundational teaching in Gnosis, which is Buddhism. And that is comprehension of the inevitability of death. This is why in Sutrayana level instruction, which is the foundational level instruction, all students undergo an extended period of meditating, visualizing, imagining their own death. Not just once, but every day. To daily meditate and imagine one's own death. Most people, when they hear about that, think, that's so morbid. Why would you do that? It's only going to make you miserable. This is the reaction of the ego. The reaction of the I, which is our obstacle to enlightenment. The reality is, we will all die, but we don't realize it. We're not cognizant of it. We don't comprehend that. The evidence is abundant. If you knew you were going to die tonight, wouldn't your schedule change? Wouldn't your activities for the rest of the day be very different from what you originally intended? That proves that we lack cognizance of death, because it is 100% possible that any or all of us could die today. No one can disagree with that. None of us know when death's coming. This building could collapse. There could be an explosion of a gas main. There could be a war. There could be a bomb. There could be a disease. There could be any number of causes which at any moment can arrive without any influence from us, without our ability to overpower it or contradict it. Death can come like that.